All right, welcome everyone. Nice to see you all. It's been a month since our last session. This is the big ideas of Jewish prayer. Today's session, we're going to be doing a little bit of a workshop. Last time was very text intensive. We looked at text and we studied and learned together. Next time we'll be doing more text study. And this time it's going to be more interactive. It's going to be more, we're going to be talking and we're going to be singing and we're going to be doing chanting. The topic is finding your own davening voice. So I've got a question for you. Before I do that, I'd like to open this session with a little bit of singing, davening, not just singing, singing davening. And I've got us up on the screen. These are the words of the Ashrei. And we're going to be singing the Hebrew, and it's transliterated down here, or English, just the first few lines, and we're going to make fit the melody that we do at synagogue after while the challah is being cut between the washing of the hands and the challah, and also that we sang over and over again for any of you who are on our bus in Israel when we went on our congregational tour. Ashrei yoshvei veitecha odia leluchasela Ashrei ha'am shekacha lo where I go? Ashrei ha'am sh'Adonai Elohav Tehila lecha avinu mimcha Elohai hamelech Kavarcha shimcha le'yov olam va'ed V'chol yom avarcheka V'halel shimcha le'olam va'ed Elai la 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 Elai la 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 Elai la 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 Elai la 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 Elai la la la. Okay, so I wanted to open with that because we're going to be working with Ashrei in different ways throughout this session, and just open it up. So when I say the word davening, what comes to mind to you?
Praying.
Praying.
I mean, I'm still singing Adon Olam from last Monday night. I can't get it out of my head.
Oh, nice.
We studied that last Monday.
Very cool. Which melody?
The one we do in the shul.
Adon Olam.
I share, yeah, and it's in my head, and it's like driving me insane.
Yeah. I love when melodies do that. They get
But
stuck
you
in your-
know, it's harder to read the transliteration, even as my Hebrew isn't 100% or isn't even 50%, but it's easier to read it in Hebrew than into, I don't know why, but in transliteration, it's Hinda shaking her head. It just is difficult.
Interesting. Beautiful. Anybody else? What is davening to you? When I say davening, what comes to mind?
When I think of,
Oh, I'm sorry.
sorry, go ahead, Hinda.
Movement.
Movement. Okay, beautiful. Right.
Chuckling.
Shuckling, that's good. I love it.
Yeah, that stuff. Yeah.
That's
When I think of
good,
it,
Judy.
Alan, go ahead.
When I think of it, I think back probably more when I was a kid, when you'd have, and then it was primarily men, but you know, everybody kind of going at their own, sort of on their own, murmuring, muttering, going fast, slow, and then everybody would kind of catch up and do something together. But you know, kind of, it's that undertone or undercurrent of sound and movement.
Is that Orthodox, Alan?
Talked about. I'm sorry?
Orthodox? Was it Orthodox?
No, it was conservative.
Oh, it was, okay.
But you know, probably, you know, more traditional.
Thank you. Anybody else? Barb?
I think there's a rhythm. You get sort of a rhythm, and I don't know if it's a rhythm to your heart, your prayers, or the Hebrew. I'm not sure.
Beautiful, or all of it. Anybody else? So davening, right? It really is like it's the sound of Jewish prayer. The Muslims, when they pray, they have their movements, right? They do all their movements and they go down and they bow. And I guess Catholics, they have their movements to how they do mass and how they do, and there's moments where people speak and then it stops and they hold up the book. That's what I remember from the few times I've seen mass. And there's a choreography to it, and so Jews, we have those sounds, right? That sound, a lot of it's sound. The sound of chanting, whether it's the murmur or the sound of chanting Haftorah or Torah, or just, and that's up and down. I love how you said that, Alan, right? Sometimes it's a murmur, sometimes it's louder, and it's everybody at their own speed. And Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi, who is he started a whole course called Davenology. He called it Davenology, right? And so it's a books, and he taught this, and he would talk about how there's different modes of davening. There's like the plaintive, and then there's like the joyous, and then there's like the challenging God, like, how could you do this to us, Ribono Shel Olam, and there's all these different modes to the Jewish prayer. And I even think that maybe non-Jewish people, when they think of Jewish people prayer, they also think of us in that way, right? They think that we're praying and shuckling and moving, and there's a sound of like the undertone and the mumbling and singing. Sometimes you break into song, and sometimes, and there's a rhythm to it. We talked about kavanah a few classes ago, and I think, I wonder what you think, but that sound and that rhythm is really what gives kavanah, right? It gives kind of intention and makes it come alive in a certain kind of way. The way our sages describe it, the Baal Shem Tov says, when you get into that space, every word is alive in the whole world, or every melody line, and everybody in their own little rhythm is like opening up a world for themselves, and then all the worlds come together to create this kind of like joint world, and it's all alive and real, and I think it can be a challenge for us a little bit, because we live in a dominant culture that prays quite differently, and you look on TV and you see a different kind of prayer, and when you grow up, and you grow up going to synagogue, but there's this real tension between Jewish prayer, which is unique. I guess all prayers are unique, and then maybe it's Protestant, or it's a different kind of prayer. It's just a different mode, and it's much more structured in a certain kind of way. It's less that cacophony of sounds and voices, and so it's hard to really to sometimes not just fall into that. And so this is what I think it's so important, and maybe the key to really enjoying prayer is finding your own voice, finding the sound of your own voice when you daven, finding what it sounds like to you. And it doesn't have to be a beautiful voice. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have even to be in the same tone of what's going on, but it's hearing the sound of your own voice, even if it's not very loud, right? We have the teaching is that even in the Amidah that we call the silent prayer, you're supposed to be mumbling enough that you can hear the sound of your own voice, but your neighbor cannot hear it. That's the halacha, that's the Jewish law. And I know it's really challenging for some people, because there's a barrier. I don't want to hear the sound of my own voice, or it's embarrassing, but I think that really adds something to your prayer when you can find the sound of your voice, whatever your voice is. And it's so everybody is a uniquely different voice, because your voice when you pray is kind of like the sound of your soul, right? It's like the extension of your soul. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be the most beautiful, soaring, voice, operatic voice, but it's just the sound of your voice in its own rhythm, as Barb was saying, finding your own rhythm within all of it. And it's different than what we talked about a few sessions ago, which was the sound. We talked about finding your own prayer voice. So your prayer voice are the words that are your own, because we're always using words that are on the page. Well, how do you make those words your own words? And we talked about interpreting those words in your own way. We say God of our fathers and God of our mothers. How do you interpret that? Could it be God of your own family and God of your ancestors and your great grandparents, or could it be the sound of your other people who you consider your spiritual? Anyway, that's the sound, that's your prayer voice, but this is your davening voice. This is something, it's so deep and unique to each person. What's the sound that resonates, that's in resonance with your own internal rhythm? What is that? And then out of that voice also comes the movement, right? The swaying. How do you sway? I remember when I went to a yeshiva in Jerusalem, so I had teachers who swayed like this, and I had teachers who swayed like this, and I had teachers who were, and it was so personality. I loved watching them. And I had one teacher, he was already in his late 70s, but he was sharp, and he was so on top of, so sharp and so full of energy. When he davened, it was really, really, he did it was like a racehorse, and then they had other teachers I had a teacher who was unbelievably creative, and his mind would take you to places, and he would do this gentle swaying back and forth like this. And it's, everybody's swaying is kind of like an extension of their personality. And so finding that is the same as your voice. And even if you do it in a very subtle way, if you're like, well, I'm not sure I want everybody to see me swing, which is okay. But I think it helps guide you through the prayer. And this is my theory. Why do we have this? Part of it is you have 100 pages of prayer to get through in 2 hours, and you need something to help you get through it. And adding your voice and adding your movement is kind of like giving you a vehicle to drive through those 2 hours of service. It's giving you something to manage it with. And sometimes you go faster, and sometimes you go slower, and sometimes you're just still and quiet and just listening, and then you get into it. But if you can keep that rhythm alive the whole time, then the whole service is alive for you. There's Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi again, who has a lot of beautiful metaphors, but he says, when you can do that, it's like the difference between eating an apple that's been on the shelf of the supermarket for 3 months, that's waxy, and you eat it and it's, really not very good. And then picking a fresh apple off a tree, and eating it there, and how juicy and fresh and good it is, right? It's so alive, it's so good. It's not like the rote, apple that's been on the shelf forever and it doesn't taste that good. So when you make it alive, that taste, we all know the difference, the difference. And sometimes it's like you can even pause on a word in your own mind, right? Because it's bringing your own rhythm to it. And sometimes you're just going, and sometimes you're just taking off, with it all, with the sound of it. So again, this is my theory, but I think what happened is we've lost some of that davening, chanting voice in our communities over the last few generations. Why? I think, when those who came before us, they wanted to really sound American, and that did not sound very American. It sounded very much from the old country, and there was only so much of the old country you wanted to bring forth. So they let go of some of those rhythms eventually, and maybe we just assimilated more. And, that was passed down, parent to child, that mode. You watched it. It was something you picked up. And so it was kind of uncouth also. It was not considered to be what everybody else did. And in general, a lot of Jewish services in the last 150 years became more like our neighbors. Except the difference is, right, in the Reform movement, our services became totally like our neighbors, right? They brought in organs, but they also shortened the service to make it 45 minutes to an hour. And they did it in a Protestant way, a little prayer here, a little prayer there, a little prayer here, and a long sermon, and that's your service. And what we did is we got rid of the davening voice, which helped us manage, the whole 2-hour service. We kept the 2 hours. So we were trying to manage a 2-hour service without that rhythm and without that davening voice as being so central. And I think now what's happening is that a lot of people are reclaiming that, even in the Reform world in the last 15, 20 years, they're reclaiming that sound of it, the sound of Jewish prayer. And at the same time as reclaiming it, I think we're also trying to open it up. And what does that mean? I think that, not all of us are comfortable davening like in the old shtetl. That's just the truth. We don't all want to, we didn't grow up in the shtetl, and not all of us want to daven in that shtetl mode. So how do you do it in a way that's that makes sense to us, and that's still that powerful tool? I think that davening voice that we have, that we can find within, is the most powerful tool in to make Jewish prayer really become alive and real. And I think that when you have it, you become what I call a self-davening individual. You can go anywhere and you can just daven yourself, because it doesn't matter what they're doing, because you've got your rhythm, you've got your chanting voice, you've got your swing, and nobody can take that away from you. Doesn't matter what they're doing. I don't care. I'm going to do my davening. There was a man who used to come to our services before COVID. His name is blanking on me. He was Russian origin. Norma, do you remember what his name was?
I remember the guy, but
he would just, he would stand up and just daven
would
in his own
daven,
way.
yes.
He would daven his own way and do his own thing. But he loved being part of us. I never felt he was apart from us. He was part of what we did, but he just did it his own way. So I
and
think
he was young too. He wasn't old.
Yeah, he was a young guy. I tried to set him up, but he wasn't interested. Anyway, different thing. But
He
anyway,
was Vladimir's friend. Ken.
Vladimir's friend. But I think if you've got, if you really feel that, the more you feel that, the more you feel you can go anywhere and just do your own thing and feel good.
Rabbi, can I ask a question?
Go for it, Barb. Yeah.
So particularly focusing on the Amida for a minute,
Yeah.
I find it easier to sort of chant and move when I'm either reading the Hebrew
Mhm.
or if I'm just like talking to God myself, like sharing my thoughts with God. I find it harder if I'm reading the English. Is there a, do people still do the, call it davening when they're reading English?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think the Hebrew has a mystery to it. It's powerful, but part of it's also the melody that you use. So Reb Zalman, again, who is like such an innovator in this, he's the one who started davening in English, like literally using English with the davening kind of chanting tones, and actually it's very effective. I think maybe we'll try actually in a few minutes. We'll try davening. Go ahead, Mike.
So on the Ashrei, the prayer, we do the English, and we have a davening chant when we do the daily Ashrei for English. The other thing I was going to say is
How do you find that? Do you like that?
Well, I actually like it all the way through. I don't see a reason to stop after 4 lines. I mean, it can continue. It doesn't have to be as elaborate.
Okay.
It just should have a sing song to it. The other thing is that the term davening is actually a Yiddish term that comes from Italy or something. I mean, it has this origin. So I don't know the Sephardic talk about davening necessarily. Or Israelis talk about davening so much unless they're Ashkenazic. And so it's just kind of like an interesting thing. It is an Eastern European form or memory.
European in general, yeah. I think it's a really interesting idea. I mean, it's interesting in Israel where kind of Ashkenazic and Sephardic culture are both distinct and meet in interesting ways, but you go to the Kotel and everybody's kind of davening and mumbling and swaying. But I remember where, one of the places that has very pure Sephardic culture is in France, because a lot of the Sephardic communities that were in North Africa just took the plane and in the 50s and 60s went to France. So when I was working a little bit in the communities of southern France, I've shared this story before, but I remember going to a gathering in somebody's house, and it was time for Mariv, and they said, okay, will you lead Mariv? And I started, I'd started leading, and then I said to friends, and I went silent, and They looked at me perplexed, and then I continued. I started again. I said, they said, what's going on? I said, what do you mean? I said, why do you stop chanting? I said, well, that's how we do it. I said, well, because in their tradition, everything is out loud. There's no mumbling in between. There's no sound of davening. Every single line, every single word is out loud. And a lot of purely Sephardic services, there is no mumbling because everything is out loud. They just do it differently. They, for example, I mean, it's alive in a different way, but in a Sephardic synagogue I used to go to as a child in Israel, everything is out loud. And then there's some services, some prayers like the Ashrei, where people around the synagogue take turns doing each line. So you do a line and then you wait, there's silence until whoever kind of I'll take this one. And then so it goes around the room and you hear different people's voices chanting the different lines of the prayer. It's really cool. And you hear, go ahead, Norma.
Question. What do you think, like today, I look at the people who are on today, I think I only see one person under 40 on. And I just wonder, Jackson, I think, I wonder how younger people would respond to this type of, davening. Have you had any comments from, like a 30-year-old crowd?
I have tried, one of the places where I really spent a lot of time thinking and working on prayer was at Camp Ramah, where I was head of prayer. I did that for 3 years, which is a long time. And I really tried to teach this, and it took a little while because kids feel inhibited, especially teenagers. I'm talking about teenagers now, but I think what they like about it, and I think young people these days are looking for something that feels authentic and an experience. So once they find a voice, they feel like, oh, I'm joining something really real and authentic, So I think people are looking for that. Jackson says 100%. Cool. So I think people are looking for it. I wish maybe I'll do a series like this for preschool and religious school parents.
Yeah, good.
Because it's important, because that when you find that, then you feel you can join in, right? And the young people these days, the older way of doing services doesn't work for them in the same way. At least they're not coming to services. So that's what I think. But so this is something I think that maybe could be to draw them in. But I really think we have to pass it on to them, and they have to also find their davening voice. They have to find their voice within all of it, and kind of it takes time to get there. But like I said, once you've got it, you've got it. Nobody can take it away from you. You just got to do it. You kind of maybe in a minute we'll do it together a little bit, and then everybody can mute themselves. They want to do it so nobody else can hear them. But I've done several things. I want to maybe share of how people these days are teaching this. Again, not too many people are, but when I was at the conservative yeshiva, this is a different time, while in rabbinical school, there was a teacher who would just put everybody would just daven in their own voice, and it sounded like a cacophony, which I didn't love. But everybody was just doing their own kind of davening voice. And then even more so, at Hebrew College, which is a rabbinical school in Newton, near Boston, which is a non-denominational rabbinical school, they have every morning 2 services, or 3 services, and one of them is called Sound Something, and everybody there just does their own thing, and it just sounds wild, but everybody does their own thing, and it's to kind of help the rabbinical student, to help anybody just find their own voice, find what does it sound like for you to lead in your own way. And I think that that it's like a connection between yourself and your soul. The Baal Shem Tov says that when you're davening, sometimes it's like you're a person drowning and you're flailing your limbs. You're like, help me, and sometimes you feel really secure and you're not moving at all. And it's there's different. There's a lot of different modes. And again, musicality doesn't matter that much, I think. And I think you can do it in English. Let's try it. Anybody have any other thoughts or comments before we continue on? And we'll try it.
When I was in grammar school, I was told by the music teacher to never sing out loud because I didn't carry a tune right. I could only mouth the words.
Oh, not nice.
It was a terrible thing, but that's why I love Friday Night Live. I sing as loud as I want. Nobody cares.
Exactly.
I don't think I sound that bad.
I think you can have people who have beautiful voices, but if they're not singing from the soul, it very quickly sounds empty.
Terrible, yeah.
And you have people who don't have that great a voice, or absolutely not that traditionally trained a voice, but if it's coming from the soul, it's really moving and it's got a power to it. I really believe that. And you know, in the Jewish sources, they say, you know, who's going to be the person who leads the service? It doesn't say you have to have a beautiful voice. It says you should have a sweet voice.
Yeah, Rabbi
that-
Merelman used to say that all the time because
Oh,
he
really?
said he couldn't carry a tune
Yeah,
either, but he's
exactly.
saying because he liked it.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's I mean, you know, it helps to be able to sing if you're going to lead if everybody else, but when you're joining with everybody else, it don't matter. And part of the musical Shabbat, one of the reasons that I'm always trying to push it, and I really hope everybody comes, is because I think it gives one the opportunity to daven. We know, because we're carrying the melody, and a lot of the melodies are 999s, and they're easy melodies to sing with. You can daven. It really makes it easy to daven with everybody in a joyful way. You know, that's another way. I think the conservative movement, one of the reasons it's moved towards music, is because it realized that's one way that helps people daven. You know, music helps people open it up, and you know, once everybody knows the melodies. So Norma, you come to Friday nights, and others here come to Friday nights. You know, those melodies are the melodies of musical Friday night, but now everybody knows them. So we sing them without the music, and they're so great. So
Right.
it would be nice to see once we're all in person, but without the music, if we can do those melodies and still make it sound really good, right?
And you
That's-
feel good also.
and the feel good. That's what prayer should do. Prayer should make you feel good. If not, what are you doing there? So anybody have any thoughts or comments before we continue on? Okay.
I just wanted to respond to Norma's thing. I'm not under 40, but reflecting on my own children, like maybe not so much at camp, but at youth you know, through the youth group, my children learned to really dive in that way. And like, I was sort of learning from them because I grew up Reform and loved the music and the service to a certain, not the organ, but you know, the certain tunes still resonate with me. But we didn't have davening. That was sort of a shock for me to get exposed to, but then eventually I came to like it. So, but I never was really taught. So seeing them, so at least in the youth group, and this is 10 years ago or 5 to 10 years ago, they were learning it there too, not just at camp. So that's, and also one thing you said earlier made me think about yoga, because one of the, you know, I practice yoga and I like that that's the breath with movement, because I find it hard to always sit still. So I think that the idea of davening, you know, as you were saying, it helps you get through the 2 hours. There's at least, you know, even if you're not moving around the room necessarily, you're moving in space and you're not always just sitting still in your seat as a sort of passive participant.
Wonderful. I love that. I love that comparison. You know, yoga, you're flowing between things, and as you're going through it, you know, there's some kind of experience happening too, and you're moving. And I definitely think it's bringing all of your limbs into your prayer experience. You're bringing your whole body into it, right? You're moving in a certain way, and there's rhythm to it. And I think that, you know, silent prayer, just sitting silently, is good, but you can't do that for 2 hours. You know, because 2 hours, you know, even, you know, as you all know, I'm a meditator, but 2 hours meditating is a long time. And it's got to be a good meditation to carry you for 2 hours, you know. So, you know, it's fine to not move, but for a certain amount of time. But if you're going to be there for 2 hours, you need movement, you need something, you need rhythm, you know. It's just it should be part of it. Well, did your kids enjoy it?
I mean, certainly 2 out of 3. I think
That's
it
a
brought
pretty
meaning
good-
to their prayer. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Very cool.
Rabbi, I want to share one thing. Back when I was quite a bit younger, I'd gone to a Quaker service, and it's an interesting service because basically everybody sits silently until you have a feeling that you want to share something with the rest of the congregation. And then people would stand up and would share a thought. And then they would sit down, and then maybe somebody else would stand up and say something. but otherwise it's, it's very quiet. But, people would just get up and share whatever they were feeling, at that particular moment.
Wonderful. Well, I think there is that place for that in the Jewish service too. It made me think of what I was saying earlier about the Sephardim. They take their turn saying the line of prayer. It's not what's in your heart, but it's okay. Who's now going to say the fourth line? Who's going to say this one? And actually, we're experimenting with the musical Shabbat morning service, our Friday night team, and we're thinking of doing the Ashrei that way, inviting people to just step up and say the line, one after the other. But the Amida, there are moments where you can be totally silent, and I think there is room for parts of the service to be like that, but the whole it's hard to get through the amount of pages the way it's traditionally designed in that mode, and it's there. If I were to rewrite the Siddur myself, I would have moments that would be more just like silence and for self-expression, and there'd be moments where we'd be just davening and all that sound, and moments for singing, and that would be a way to have different things so everybody finds something that they enjoy and they like in the service. There's ways to do it with the service as it is, and that's what we're working towards. I do like that mode too of the silence. But how long is that Quaker service? Is it 2 hours?
You're on mute.
I don't recall. I don't think it's that long. No.
Okay. So unless anybody else wanted to say anything, we're going to go back, I think, to the Ashrei. And what I wanted to present to you, those of you, when I first came, we used to have these sessions on Wednesday nights, chanting Psalms. Norma went, and the Lawrences, and I don't know if anybody else here came, I can't remember.
Yeah, that was fun.
We would light candles in the chapel and chant Psalms, and do it we would say the Misha Berach list and say we're chanting Psalms for the people on the Misha Berach list and other things. But we would use what I call to be like a very basic kind of Ashkenazi chanting voice. And we're going to do that in the English for Ashrei together responsively. And then again, I always used to preface this by saying this was like the chanting voice I would hear the most in Jerusalem, at the Kotel, or if there was a yeshiva. I remember if there was like a terror attack, and the head of the yeshiva would come and get out a psalm and say, okay, we're going to say a psalm responsively. They would say it in this melody, a plaintive melody, in a Jewish minor key. So this is how it would go. Joyous are they who dwell in your house, they shall praise you forever. Joyous the people who are so favored, joyous the people whose God is Adonai. So we'll just dive in through this first page, and you can be on mute or not on mute. And I think the English, if you chant, can still be powerful, and then you know what you're saying, which is really nice, right? So you can either be on mute or not on mute, and we'll do this together. Joyous are they who dwell in your house, they shall praise you forever. Joyous the people who are so favored, joyous the people whose God is Adonai. I exalt you, my God, my sovereign. I praise your name always. Every day I praise you, glorifying your name always. Great is Adonai, greatly to be praised. Though your greatness is unfathomable. One generation praises your works to the next, telling of your mighty deeds. I would speak of your majesty and of your wondrous acts.
Generations speak of your awe-inspiring deeds. I too shall recount your greatness.
They
They
recount
recount your
your
greatness
and sing
sing of your righteousness. Adonai is merciful and compassionate, patient and abounding in love.
Adonai
Is good to all, and God's mercy embraces all of creation. All of creation acknowledges you,
and the
faithful bless you.
Anybody find it was easier to kind of think about the words a little bit in your mind as we were doing it that way?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yes.
And kind of like a chanting melody sometimes allows you more to think about the words in a singing melody, right? Because singing melody, you're singing about you're thinking about the melody and sometimes more than the words. But the chanting, you're thinking about the
melody.
It's nice, a chanting melody. So let's try it in the Hebrew. What's better for people, transliteration or Hebrew?
Me.
Hebrew.
Hebrew.
I don't know if I can get both.
I
on
can
the
do
page.
either.
So you know what? Here both are on the page. There's the Ashrei and the Hebrew on the top right. At the bottom is a transliteration. I know it's really small. And we're just going to do the first few verses over and over again a few times in the Hebrew in the same melody. Ashrei yoshvei beitecha od yalelu b'specha. Ashrei Ashrei yoshvei beitecha od yalelu b'specha. Ashrei ha'am shekachalo, Ashrei ha'am sh'Adonai Elohav, Ashrei yoshvei beitecha od yalelu b'sela. Ashrei ha'am Joyous are they who dwell in your house. They shall praise you forever. Joyous people who are so favored. Joyous the people
Whose God is Adonai.
So what did you think of the difference between Hebrew and English for this one?
The English was easier.
Yeah, definitely.
See, so I really think it's nice to daven in English. You know, the tradition says you actually can do the entire service in English. You know, the only parts you should need to do in Hebrew are the Shema and the beginning of the Amidah, and all the rest you can do in English. Halachically, and you can be perfectly like you prayed. In the conservative movement, just historically, when the conservative movement was born as a response to Reform Judaism in Germany, Hebrew was one of the really big things that differentiated Reform and conservative, which is why Hebrew has been such a focus. And I think there's a lot of reasons that that's important, so that we can keep Hebrew going and teach it to our children, and with the state of Israel and being able to communicate with Jews around the world. But with prayer, it is nice to go back and forth with English, and this is why the cantor and I, we do some English in the service, so Saturday morning, singing in English, God of all ages, God of all creatures, when he sings that.
And the minion too, I know when I've come that you and Stuart do it.
So this is another way of thinking about it is I was at a service with a Russian congregation, and they did the Amida in Russian.
Really?
And one of the guys in my group that was the most moving prayer that he had ever heard. And we also have members who are Spanish speakers. What an amazing thing it would be to hear the Ashrei in Spanish.
But how do you think it would be, Rabbi Glick? Let's say like I think over the years, even though I can't read all of it in Hebrew, I think I just memorized a lot, but I've
Yeah.
never been able to memorize Ashrei or Yigdal. Those are my two
Hmm.
failures. So what would happen if I'm singing Ashrei on, because usually I'm silent, okay?
Yeah.
On
yeah.
Saturday morning, because I'm
Yeah.
there a lot. If I were singing it in English, would that annoy anybody?
I don't think so. I think you should go ahead and do it. I think I'd be so,
Try.
I would be so happy if our sound of our davening together in the sanctuary was a little bit less everything in total I mean, there's
Chord.
moments where it's nice that there's moments where we're all together, but there'd be nice if there are moments where we were each,
Different.
yeah, a little bit
You
different. I think it would
you
bring.
might want to warn the cantor that that's coming
That's
though.
Yeah, right. You're right. Good, Barb.
Let him know.
Yeah,
Just let
yeah,
him
yeah.
know.
Well,
So he doesn't freak.
exactly. Well, I'll let him know. Maybe we'll even talk about it. We'll try. We'll say this Shabbat we're going to try and do it this way. And I think it's nice because if you just sit back when you have a cantor of as beautiful a voice as ours, you can just sit back and listen to it. But then, are you praying? I'm not sure. You're doing something, but when you're there and you're bringing your voice. I mean, there are times where it's beautiful. We all sing together in the same exact time. That's totally beautiful. But there's nice there'd be moments if we're going through our prayers in other ways and making it alive. And so
And I was gonna say that's one of the reasons why I love to chant Haftorah because of the trope, and it does just make it so much more meaningful and beautiful because you're singing it and the trope, like the way you end every phrase, you end every sentence. So even when you were just now chanting in English, we did the same thing. You kind of roll into the end of each sentence and each phrase. And that was, I love that.
So that's, and I think it's a nice and interesting point, which is definitely doesn't have to be we're all like one person singing one and the other. We're almost on tune, right? When we were doing that just now, even with Zoom, you could still hear we were all singing the same melody, but it felt we were all doing it together, right? We're all doing the same thing, but yet we were all praying. I thought it was beautiful. I found it was beautiful in its own way. It was really nice.
When Stuart first came 22 years ago, and Howard was still doing lots of Haftorahs, he made tapes that Stuart used to give to the Hebrew school kids to learn to practice trope.
Oh, Howard did it?
Yeah, 22 years
Interesting.
ago.
I didn't know
Mhm.
that. So as we were saying, I thought, well, what if we do the Amida in English? Praise are you, Adonai, our God, and God of our ancestors, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca. I don't like the melody for that one. But, yeah, I was going to try to do the weekday, but the weekday melody is escaping me at the moment.
It's
But I
not
think
so easy.
not so easy always. You got to find your melody. So that's why. So these are melodies, and when I first came to when I went to conservative rabbinical school, and I came more from an Orthodox background, and the way I led services was more Orthodox, and I had more of a chanting voice, and then I would hear the conservative melodies, which I do now, and I like them. But I said, you lose something when the melody is too complicated because it stops being chanting and it becomes being, a song, and some songs are beautiful, but when you did the chanting really gives you something, and that's what they do in the Sephardic world. Everything is chanting, right? And they chant the whole thing from A to Z. But chanting is powerful. Chanting has a quality to it. Hinda, looks like you're about to say something.
I'm just going to say chanting puts me in a certain mood. I can't fully explain it, but it captures me in a way that just singing doesn't. It's something about chanting that I really get into.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, there is something, and I've thought actually in recent weeks to maybe bring back that Wednesday night Psalms group every now and then, where we would just chant like that. There might be some, and not just chanting, chanting also with the purpose of for people who are sick and Saint Tehillim, which is a thing. But I agree, chanting puts you in the mood, and it's a healing. There's something nice about it. It kind of puts you in a peaceful zone.
It's meditative.
Yeah.
Right.
It's meditative.
Yep.
Yeah. So one of the things that I encourage everyone to do, is find, if it's comfortable for you, find one prayer. If there's some of you I know already say the Shema at night, or maybe some other prayers, but try chanting in some kind of chanting voice. And if you like the one that we just did, send me an email and I'll record it for you. And you can use that very easy melody and try chanting out loud, and see how it helps you as you say a prayer. And at the beginning, I can't remember who was saying, maybe it was Barb, that the English isn't always as, you don't get as much from the English, but that's also because we're saying it, we proclaim your holiness on earth. If you say, we proclaim your holiness on earth as it is proclaimed and on heaven above, that's very different than saying, we proclaim your holiness on earth. And, the English readings that we do throughout our service, they're responsive, they're nice because it brings English in, but sometimes it breaks, it's like it breaks the flow. I try and do them in a voice, but just saying something without a little bit of feeling or something underneath breaks the flow of that zone underneath, the rhythm.
It kind of becomes rote as opposed to prayerful.
Exactly. And I think in some ways, this davening voice, whatever it is, davening voice, chanting voice, stops your prayer from being rote because it's kind of improvised. It's not you're not doing an exact same thing, but it's coming from your depths, and so it stops prayer from being rote, which is the most important thing in prayer, probably. I wanted to try, unless anybody else has any comment, I wanted to try one thing. We did this at the Kala, but I want to try this again because because sometimes, some people, those traditional melodies don't always work for them, the chanting melodies. I think it is nice to have them, but you can really do it in many different ways. My father, who has, who's such a tradition of song in his family, from his grandfather was a chazan, and his uncle, who was Shlomo Carlebach, and his other uncle was one of the great composers of Jewish music. But my father doesn't have a very musical voice. And he actually kind of likes a jazzy. When he leads services, he does it in a jazzy kind of way. And I've known others who lead in a kind of jazzy way. And that's just the sound of their davening voice. It's a jazzy voice. There's a Shlomo Carlebach melody that my father sings. So it's he sings it in a very jazzy way. It goes like this: nine nine na la la nine 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 na 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 nine nine nine. Nine 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 na 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 nine nine nine. La 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 la. La 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 la. Joyous are they who dwell, live in your house. They shall praise you forever. Joyous the people who are so favored. Joyous the people's God is Adonai. So you can go on and on singing that to anything, and you know what? The words might not fit perfectly, but who cares? And that's, I think, the difference. Shlomo Carlebach, who made up all these melodies, he used to sing the melodies to many different words, and sometimes the words fit perfectly, and sometimes they didn't, and he'd gobble up a few words, but it didn't matter because it was more about what it created inside of you. So we could do it also too. We did it at the Kala. A few of my favorite things. These are a few of my favorite. Nine 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 nine. Joyous are they who dwell in your house. They shall praise you forever. Joyous the people who are so favored. Joyous the people whose God is Adonai. I exalt you, my God, my sovereign. I praise your name always. Every day I praise you, glorifying your name always. Great is Adonai, great
greatly to be praised, though
your
your
greatness is unfathomable. One generation praise your works to the. It's a little bit messy, but it's still fun, right?
Yeah, but it's easier than the
Yeah.
other melody.
It's easy, another
It's
melody.
like-
I mean,
It's like
you know,
singing Hanukkah, Hanukkah,
Right,
to
yes,
Donna
right.
Blum or something, you know?
And these are melodies are in our kishkas in a different way, right? And we love those melodies. So it's, I just want to liberate people from thinking they have to do it in some specific way. Like do it to a few of my favorite things, be liberated.
Yeah, that's good.
Just take it up, enjoy it, enjoy it. The other one, Scarborough Fair. Joyous are they who dwell in your house. They shall praise you forever. Joyous the people who
are so
are
favored. Joyous the people whose God is Adonai.
I exalt you, my
My
God, my
God, my
sovereign.
God,
I
I
praise your
praise your
name
name
always.
always.
Every
Every day
day I
I praise
praise
you,
you,
glorifying your
your
name
name
always.
always. Ashrei Yoshvei Ve'echa,
Oh,
Oyalelu Chasdei Ashreyam shekachol, Ashreyam. That was nice too, right?
Very, very nice.
It's
Very
like Scarborough Fair. Yeah, I mean that's a beautiful melody, and like we were saying earlier, even those melodies, that's the Ashkenazic melodies. How old are they? 300 years, 100 years, 500 years, even 700 years. But as we joke, some of the Adon Olams and everything that we feel are from Sinai or from beer halls in Germany. They're all of these come from different places. And what were the melodies that were sung in a temple in Jerusalem? Who knows? But some of these melodies have spiritual power or emotional power, and it's nice to experiment and to try different things.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
because of the class, not just today's class, I found particularly in Minyan, where I do more in English, I try to loosen up and, move some more. And it will sometimes just make up a tune as I go along. But what I find is one of my bigger inhibitors, I guess, is feeling like I've got to try to do it all, like do the whole Amida, when I kind of have gotten not stuck on, but got
Into the groove.
Particular prayer, a groove, whatever you want to call it, and everybody's kind of whipped by me, and so I find that that's again something that is just something to be conscious of. Is you may not, you probably won't finish everything, and you just have to accept it. Or at least I think you have to just say, okay, I will do what I can and move on.
Yeah, I think that's a really big question, and we do everything so quickly, and I mean, you can also there's some things definitely, you're not gonna be able to say every word, and some things you just okay. I've only done one line of Ashrei. We're already at the big end of Ashrei, but I love that line of Ashrei, so I'm just gonna forget the rest of Ashrei. But I really did Ashrei because I did one line of Ashrei, and the truth is that all the Psalms before the Amida are all there to get you in the zone for the Amida. So if you only do a word of all of them, but it got you in the zone, great. And for the Amida, I mean, if you can't do all of it, you can't do all of it. But I would also say if you're enjoying doing it, it doesn't matter where people are. You continue doing it. I mean, the way we do it, which is the same as most conservative congregations, which is we don't give too much time for people to end. And I wish sometimes I think we should do more. It's just not our rhythm. But when my father comes and davens with our morning minyan, if you've been there when my father is there, he will, he speaks, he can obviously read Hebrew very, very quickly, but he will continue davening as a Amida, even if everybody else continues something else, because for him, that's the most important part of the service. And he will go on and finish at his own pace. And you can do that, and I think there's something nice about breaking that thing that we all have to be in the same place. And, oh, look, this person hasn't finished. Look, or this or that, or something the rabbi talking, okay, I need to stop what I'm doing. But I think it's, let's honor everybody's prayer, and I think that's really nice. Honor your prayer. If you take longer, you take longer, and go ahead.
So in the Amida, I like to make sure to hit all the blessings. Want to make sure that I say, the thankful for being blessed for being thankful, blessings for thankfulness and blessings for health, and all those blessings are that's like at the core of the Amida. So whether I do all of the prayers or not, it's not as important as making sure, at least for myself, that I've concentrated on the blessings that are in the Amida.
Beautiful.
What I was going to add is that I always find it at the end of the Amida is when I have my private prayers.
Yeah.
Like I kind of go off script, and whatever is happening in my life, or the week,
Right.
or someone who's ill or whatever, I have my private prayers. And so I think, unless I'm wrong, that's the best place to put it, would be at the end of the Amida.
Definitely, that's the place to do it. Yeah, that's exactly the place to do it. And
This class was very freeing of what I feel I'm able to do at services.
wonderful. Well, that's really that's my message, and it's the purpose of prayer is to get something out of it.
Right.
Not to follow something that who knows where it came from and how it came to be. And
Somebody
maybe-
telling you to shut up.
Exactly, and people should feel very free to pray the way they want to at home and services, and I'll talk about the cantor sometime about this class, and I really think it's the future, because you want to get something out of those 2 hours. You really want to get something out of it, and it's bringing your own voice to it and feeling like you're free, and that you're part of something, and you're doing it together. And we were all chanting together on Zoom. It felt like we were doing something together, right? And that was nice, and you want to feel that. You want to feel like you're doing something meaningful, chanting together with other people. And that not to
Sport.
say again.
It's a participation sport.
Exactly.
Right.
You're not there to just observe.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Without a ball.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's part of it is also, the old architecture of synagogues was the bima is high, which was the Protestant way, and that kind of also creates separation. But the bima, if the bima was a little bit lower, I mean, in Sephardic synagogues, the bima is high, but it's in the middle, and you surround it. You're all the way around, right? So it's a different mode of thinking of what it is. So it's kind of inhibiting the way our kind of typical suburban shul. It's like, okay, it's all happening up there. But the cantor said too, he wished our bima was lower, and that we could, have. But we'll, after COVID, maybe we'll think of something that we could do. I mean, it's beautiful, it's grand. There's certain high holidays, there's certain moments where it's nice to have a high bima, but it's also nice when you feel like we're all praying together on the same.
Well, sometime you and Stuart could just come down.
Yeah.
Like you did during the pandemic, remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, once in a great while, that would be good.
Yeah. We were moving in that direction, and if we were able to the problem is just one big piece of wood, but if we could somehow change the bima to make it a little bit, half the height, just half the height. If you could take half the height, so it wasn't so like, but it's impossible to do, I think. I mean, what do you think, Morris? You're the woodworker.
Oh, yeah, Morris.
Well, yeah, I think it's, you've got the wheels underneath, that create it, make it move.
Yeah.
And those are like the size of, the wheels on a railroad car. So unless you put smaller wheels on and bring everything down, I don't know if it would work.
Yeah.
Morris, it's a great shirt.
Oh, thank you.
Shirt.
All right, everybody. Well, I hope everybody, nice to see you. I hope.
Thank you. It was great.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so
Rabbi.
much. Toda
That was a
rabah.
great
Keep
class.
praying.
Rabbi,
Yes,
Thank you.
it's lovely.
Keep davening, and let's
you.
bring it
Thank
into
you.
our sanctuary.